What's up, guys? This is Joshua Toomey of the Talk Toomey Podcast, and you are listening to Discography Discussion.
You know, Brandon Kellum worked his fucking Brandon Kellum magic, and
they probably have a set schedule. I mean, shit like that helps.
We have a set schedule.
No, I didn't. I'm not knocking us. I'm saying that's what's helping them. God, you're always so defensive, man.
And if you drove 8 hours to see a band in a city across the state and you're still defensive, then you are ready for this episode of Discography Discussion. I am Joe. That is Dan. That is Geoff. And everything is about to get kind of weird for some people.
Yeah, it might be. What are we talking about this week, Geoff?
Oh, new metal. Oh, yeah.
How dare you bring that word up?
We're going to listen to some
metalheads.
We're going to talk about some new metal for you kids tonight.
Dude, I got no problem with new metal. Never have.
You know, maybe in my elitist days I did. I'm more into it now than I was. I've been listening to new metal for a week now, and it's been an experience, I can tell you that.
Yeah, I think some of this stuff just doesn't deserve labels. I think new metal just gets a bad rap.
Yeah, I guess if you want
pun intended.
I guess if you want to, you know,
Pun intended.
take a total hippie mentality to it, that's cool too.
Yeah, that's totally me, man. You know me and labels. I don't like them.
We are going to definitely get into labels and whether or not they apply. I know that I've always had a problem with labels in new metal because if you really break it down, and I should probably save this for when our guest calls in, if you really break it down, the thing about new metal is there really is no label that applies.
Not really, no.
It's more of a timeline.
A lot of the bands don't sound like each other, but we'll save that for later. And I decided if we were going to talk about new metal that we needed to go to the expert, the guy that might know more about new metal than Joe does.
And how dare you?
So we have a very special guest this week, Mr. Joshua Toomey of the Talk Toomey Podcast.
How in the world did you pull that off?
Well, I sent him an email and was like, I just have to convince him to be on the show. And then I was like, hey, do you want to be on our show? And he was like, okay. I mean, I don't know. If you listen to metal podcasts, you've already probably heard of Talk to Me. So I don't think he needs any introduction at all.
Let's get him on the line.
We'll get him on the line.
Hey, everybody. Before we start talking to Josh, I just wanted to take a minute to say thank you to everyone who listens and thank you to our subscribers. If you are not a subscriber, you can find everything Discography Discussion at discussmetal.com. We are on Google Play. We are on iTunes. We are on Stitcher. We are on TuneIn Radio. So if you have an Amazon Echo product, you can say to it, Alexa, play the latest episode of Discography Discussion, and she will. We're also on Facebook and on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe. It really helps us out and lets us know you're listening. If you are not a patron, you can become one at patreon.com/Discuss Metal. Without further ado, here comes Joshua Toomey.
Yeah, so when you emailed me and said, like, yeah, you want to talk about Pantera or we could talk about new metal. So, full confession, I hate Pantera.
There it is.
Man, they're my all-time favorite. So.
Oh, they're great. Don't get me wrong.
I almost wrote you back like, I really want to talk Pantera. But
I'm sorry. Well, here's the thing. We had a Pantera episode lined up. Like, we were going to talk about Pantera. I was going to swallow my pride. I was going to admit that they're actually a great band, you know, all that stuff. And then...
so is it actual Pantera you hate, or is it like everything around them?
It's Phil.
Yeah, okay.
Let's be honest. It's Phil. It's the whole tough guy, ultra masculine persona that he puts off. I'm not even really going to go into like the racist stuff,
right?
But it's like, I mean, I get me wrong. I mean, the music is fantastic. The vocalist, however, just leaves a lot to be desired, in my biased opinion.
The weird thing was we were prepping for that show, and I got to listen to the glam Terra stuff, like the really old 80s stuff, and I found that my opinion of the band inverted. I was like, wait a minute, I actually kind of think the glam stuff is pretty good. What's wrong?
It's funny. I've been a huge fan of Pantera since I was like 13, 14, so the early 90s. and I never really went back and dove into the Glamterra era until we went on a family trip. I mean, this had to have been no more than a month ago, and I just put it on YouTube and listened to it in the car. And I was like, man, the song, like the playing was really good, but you could just tell the songs weren't there, and it was really weird. Like you could tell why they were never signed as a glam band because, as for as good of players as they were, they just didn't, they didn't come through on those albums.
It was derivative. I think it was the only thing that was wrong with it. Like it was really good, but it was so derivative of other bands. Like it was like if you like Kiss, then you'll love Pantera, and then people are like, "Well, fuck you! I'm just going to listen to Kiss. Why do I care?" Like,
yeah, right.
Yeah. So I mean, I actually enjoyed some of the Glamterra stuff more though because it wasn't so tough guy. Which is weird because I'm a big hardcore guy, so like you'd think that would bother me in like hardcore music, but it doesn't as much.
Right.
But
this has been our secret Pantera episode with Josh Toomey.
Right, this is good.
I know, right? It's starting to get good, right?
I've been recording it on my end, so I'll release it on my podcast.
Right. Hey man, I didn't listen to new metal all week for no reason.
I don't even have a single note written down. I don't need to on this one. So
you don't, man. We're like, did Travis warn you? Like we're completely off topic.
Yeah, I've listened to a few episodes, so yeah, I'm good.
yeah, we don't even care.
Travis probably his interview style. Like I would listen to him interview anybody.
Oh,
like,
dude.
I love him.
It's addiction. Like it totally.
I could almost
say
he's my favorite podcaster.
He is mine as well. Like 100%. Like totally honest. I mean, I could suck a bit. Actually, Josh, you're my favorite podcaster. But
No.
I mean, actually, I like yours though because yours is a little bit more music focused, which I do enjoy. But I just listened to his new episode with the singer from Daughters, and it was just like,
dude, that got heavy.
It just I was like, wow, he like really opened up. Like we're kind of the guys that like the stuff that he's able to just pull out of people is just insane.
Yeah, I think that's partly just him too. I don't think that's. Obviously, that's the one thing I like about my podcast name is it's not. I mean, I do put metal podcasts in there just so if you're searching it, you're searching out metal podcast, you'll find it. But I mean, with discography discussion, you're not necessarily, batting down to just discussing metal. You could technically discuss anyone's discography, in sync for all I care. What's funny is there's actually already a Talk Toomey, and it's
really
it's a speech pathology course made by a woman named her name's like Amanda Toomey.
Okay.
And I guess she's never reached out. I'm pretty sure she's aware, but because there's no way she's not. But yeah, I think she started it a year before I started the podcast. Yeah. And it's one of those things where I would never even think to Google search this before I named it.
Right.
I was just like, yeah, there's no way. And then like one day I was like, wait a minute. And she has like 92 likes on Facebook, and it's in Chicago. I think it's a pretty localized thing, but It's funny. She'll hashtag Talk to Me sometimes. so when I'm looking for something, her stuff pops up. So I mean, I'm sure it's the other way around too.
That's
I should
funny.
Reach out and say hello.
Right.
So what would the subject be of the Talk to Me versus Talk to Me?
Talk
podcast?
to Me versus Talk to Me.
I don't know, man. Being a one-man solo thing here, it's like overanalyze everything and have no one to bounce it off of.
Sure, that's why I got in touch with Joe and Geoff here because I would have been out of control on my own.
Right.
I wouldn't have made good decisions.
Super elitist and super drunk.
Super.
I was gonna have a couple of beers with this one, but my last podcast, I don't know if hopefully you guys aren't blues fans, but.
I'm a massive blues fan. I'm a season ticket holder.
We're from St. Louis, so
I'm actually a season ticket holder, so I'm a huge fan.
So I'm a giant Predators fan.
Right?
Hey, they're actually number 3 on my list. So
hey, you know what though? As much as I respect the Blues, if they can show the Blues up as well as they did, then they deserve everything they get. You know what I mean?
But we were
they're a fucking great hockey team, man.
We the Preds were playing Game 6 Monday night, and. So I'm sitting there just I was like, I'll have a beer or two. The next thing I know, I had like 7 beers, and I still had to finish the podcast because they always come out on Tuesdays. So I went to listen back to it a couple of days later. I was kind of not looking forward to listening to it.
Sure.
And I'm like, oh my God, just like screaming and
right.
And it was pretty rough. So
man, I'm an Austin Watson fan though. I will tell you that.
Nice.
He's a beast.
When I live, so I grew up in Nashville. I live in Louisville now, but I grew up down there, and I can see like Titans crap behind me. So sorry about your Rams.
Oh, they were not our Rams.
We don't have a football team in St. Louis. What are you talking
about? We hate Stan Kroenke, the owner of the Rams. That guy's a massive.
That dude's been
dickhead.
hated since day one. I mean,
yeah.
He's never had a good standing with the St. Louis populace at large.
Oh, it's so funny, honestly. Like when I talk to a lot of people on the, podcasting or their podcast, the initial like 10, 15, 20 minutes prior to us recording is always like, so what's your sports team? Oh man, I remember when the Titans played that team, and
right.
We always end up, turn that off.
Right.
But yeah, man, we used to play my pre-Primer 55 band. Well, we played Pops once, but
my old band played Pops a few times. Yeah.
My prior band to that actually played a bunch of shows back in the day with Big Blue Monkey and Low Cash prior to their being Story of the Year.
Yep.
So
I remember that.
We used to trade shows with like what was that place called? Galaxy.
The Galaxy, dude. Yeah, that's old school. Yeah.
Yep. And that's a cool venue. That was like truly late 90s, like 98, 99.
Did you ever play at the Creepy Crawl in St. Louis?
I never did. I've always heard about it and always seen it on like tour itineraries, but I never like Mississippi Nights. I remember like I actually saw a show there once, but I played Pops 2 or 3 times, and then the Galaxy I think 2 or 3 times.
Pops was so nice to us, like because we were a local band, and they like everywhere in St. Louis. St. Louis is kind of like a Ponzi scheme as far as local bands go. So if you're in a local band in St. Louis, and let's say, like, for example, let's say Primer 55 is going to come play, in St. Louis, and you want to open for them, So you go up to the venue and they charge you $100 for a set of tickets. Yeah. And then they're like, okay, well, anything you sell above that $100, then you get to keep. Whatever. It's like, well, nobody's heard of us. They only hear about the band. They've only heard of the band that we're opening for.
Right.
And it was like that at literally every single venue except Pops. We literally, I drove up to Pops with $100 because I was like used to that abuse. And I drove up there and they're like, oh no, dude, here's the tickets. Just have fun, And we're like, holy shit. Okay, cool. Like they were just a really good venue to play at, and they were classy, I guess.
Yeah, except for the strip clubs.
The strip club, yeah,
right across the street.
Like a strip club and a liquor store all in the same parking lot.
Yes. Right. Well, we always wondered too. We're like, oh man, all the touring bands that roll through here. I wonder if they know that like East St. Louis is somewhere they're supposed to avoid.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, I think you could kind of tell.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's always good times.
Yeah.
Dan, do you want to introduce our guest for those that do not know?
Yes, this is Mr. Joshua Toomey from the Talk Toomey Podcast. He's a legend at this point, man. Like, maybe he wouldn't admit to that, but he's a legend to us. Us being nobody, and I'm very inspired. I like the quality of guests that he has. This dude has awesome people that you want to hear him talk about literally every week. I'm glued to it like a soap opera.
Well, thanks for having me on, guys. It's a pleasure to be on here.
Yeah, man, it's an honor for us for sure.
Absolutely.
I was just gonna let you talk. I liked what was going on, so I was just sitting back and listening.
Right. Yeah. So we when we were emailing back and forth, I was like, we do Pantera or new metal, and eventually we are going to do a Pantera show. And honestly, at this point, if you enjoy talking to us tonight, maybe that'll be your return. It's the
Part 2.
It's the Pantera, overview where you guys can all explain to me very carefully how I'm wrong, and because I'm sure I am. I have a very weird view of Pantera, and it's not consistent. It's a little bit hypocritical, So, but we can get into that at a later time. But I like the idea of nu metal because we've been talking about the idea of doing episodes that are kind of a genre overview, like not to be the genre police, like put everything in a category and go with it or whatever, but just kind of like we wanted to do kind of like what's the deal with nu metal? Why does everybody hate nu metal? And is it a justified hatred or is it not?
I think in the long run, I think nu metal got a bad rap. No pun intended, I guess, but got a bad name over time just because of how diluted the pool got.
Sure.
When you started out with just a handful of bands that didn't necessarily sound the same, but still had kind of the same qualities.
Yeah.
Then you had like that second wave of nu metal bands that pretty much had a formula and just kind of watered it down, and then it kind of became 80s glam to me. It became very silly. And, me being kind of in the middle of it all, too, at the same time, I mean, I kind of sat back and looked around and I was like, man, this is getting really bad. And,
right.
And for the longest time, and we'll get into it, but for the longest time, me being able to say that I was in a band like Primer 55 was never the cool thing to say. It was always like, yeah, I was in a couple of bands. Oh, yeah. And like people may or may not remember that band and this, that, and the other thing. But with the podcast and talking to people and being able to kind of relate to a lot of people, I'm having more people come out and say, you need to promote that you were once in Primer 55. That's something that not a lot of people got to do, and
right.
Tour like that. And it's almost come back around to where like Poison is selling out arenas again. Now saying that you're in a nu metal band is actually kind of cool again. It's kind of weird.
Right. Yeah. When we were in Kansas City, I was like, I need to prep up on my nu metal because it's been a while, and so I listened to, and again, like I did on the Travis episode, I'm not trying to suck up in any regard, but like I've got the 2 Primer 55 releases, like I've got, I was really into that stuff when it was like really relevant, I remember hearing This Life on the radio, and like I thought like, dude, this band's going to be huge after this. Like that's, that single was just like, oh my God. They're like, cause the first album is great. It's got that like rappy, it's got this attitude to it, that permeates the record. And I really like that because I was really into bands early on, like Primer 55 and like Head PE and like that kind of sound. I was never really into Limp Bizkit very much. It's funny because I would show people like Head PE and I'd show them like Primer 55 and they'd be like, why aren't you into Limp Bizkit? I'm like, because they're douchebags and these guys don't come off like that.
Right.
And,
but we were. So. It's funny. I'll piggyback on your This Life story. And in full disclosure, I was not on either of those albums.
Yeah.
And I had actually auditioned prior to the new release coming out.
Uh-huh.
And they actually went with Kobe, whose picture's on the album.
Right.
And during the touring cycle for the new release, Kobe left, and Bobby Burns had called out, reached out to me and said, "Hey man, are you still interested? We have a tour." He basically called me and said, "We have a tour in like 5 days. You want to do it?" And I'm like, "Well, hell yeah, I want to do it."
Yeah,
but,
let's do it.
But so onto your This Life thing, I actually got a CD sampler, and to put it in, and This Life was on there. And man, as soon as I heard This Life, I was just like, I was bummed that I didn't get it in the first place, but man, I was like super bummed when I heard This Life. I was like, man, this is about to blow up. This is about to be the biggest band out there, and blah blah blah. But
right.
All that stuff happened, and then the 9/11 happened, and everything pretty much stopped, and blah blah blah. But yeah, man, when I first heard This Life, I was totally blown away, and I was just like even more bummed that it didn't originally get in Primer 55.
Right. Well, because like I was singing in bands that went nowhere before that, and I remember when I heard This Life, I was like, dude, I should start like the whole screaming thing. Like that's I like the way it sounds on This Life, and it's weird too because like you look back at it now and you're like, well, that screaming isn't that like intense or in your heart, but like I got and that's the funny thing is the times that I had seen Primer 55, I probably watched you up on stage playing it, like it was one of those things where I was like, I should really start pushing what I'm trying to do further, and that song was really big for me because I was like, I just loved how melodic it was and how, but it was still like, it still had that Primer 55 edge to it, like it was like, here, we're going to give you this more melodic stuff. Because the first record, was much more aggressive in the sense of, it was in your face. Mm-hmm. It had this like kind of street attitude to it, which, I mean, as a white suburban kid, I can't really identify with street attitude, but for whatever reason with nu metal at the time, you felt like you could identify with it, and it was just, I loved the guitars, and I loved the singing and the screaming dynamic, and I was really like all in at that point because I was huge into stuff like Head PE and Third Strike a few years later. I really enjoyed the like kind of like the rapcore element of nu metal, which I think is one of the things that most people don't like.
Right. No, I loved it all the way back in the day, when it first started popping up. So
right.
So yeah, I've always been a huge fan. It always had just kind of like not necessarily a party vibe, but it always seemed to be maybe a little bit more upbeat than thrash.
Right. Well, thrash kind of got a little boring, I think, at that point. It had kind of run its course where it was like, I mean, you'd listen to a Slayer album and it was like, yeah, it's really good, it's really technical or whatever, but like
they weren't the same.
Yeah, they weren't the kind of songs that would stick with you. Like you'd listen to it, you'd enjoy it while you were listening to it, and then when it was over, and you didn't really remember anything.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, it was nu metal came out at a time where I was big into, I was huge into Metallica, probably one of my all-time favorite bands, as I like to say, but Metallica, Pantera, all that stuff, early 90s. And then, as time was going on, everybody was starting to get into a little bit more into Faith No More, a little bit more into Helmet, a little bit more into, things like even Biohazard started coming out. And
sure.
Then, Judgment Night soundtrack, I think, was a huge stepping point for nu metal. Just going back with all those great collaborations between, like Sir Mix-a-Lot and who did they do with like Mudhoney and Sir Mix-a-Lot?
Yeah, I remember
all
that,
this, all that stuff, and Helmet and House of Pain, and 92, 93 was just leading up to what I think with the birth of nu metal would obviously be that Korn's debut in 94.
Right.
And when that came out, I was a buddy of mine. We were living in Nashville, and we're 15. I think he's 16, 17. And we drive up to Bowling Green, Kentucky, which is about an hour and a half away, just as a crazy late night teenager road trip. And we go to the mall, and this is when Blockbuster Music had listening stations where they would open up any CD you wanted.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
and they would let you listen to it, prior to buying it. And I had heard of Korn from Metal Maniacs magazine. Did a special on Foundations Forum like 93.
Oh, wow.
And there was a small picture of Head down in the corner, and I was like, man, that dude looks crazy. That's when he had his little spiky things going on.
Yeah,
there's the 7-string guitars and the baggy clothes. I mean, all of it just like as a kid, being like, I think I was probably about 14, 15, and just seeing all that, and I'm like, man, this is something different. And so when I heard the album came out, we went and listened to it. And just that ride cymbal at the beginning of Blind and just the whole build up, it's just like everything kind of came together. And, I hate to say it, but in 94, when that Korn album came out, I think it like totally changed my life, changed my musical life completely.
Sure.
That's one weird thing about Korn that I think we've talked about before, but, Korn gets the blame for creating nu metal. But the further on they go into their career and the further on that you start to define what nu metal is, the less it applies to Korn directly.
Yeah.
But it's still cool to me that, like, yeah, this is why I like nu metal. Why? Because it's fun.
It was definitely always fun. That was the one thing. I mean, we would go to all the shows, and it was heavy. It was, down-tuned. It was all that stuff. But at the same time, it did seem a little bit more uplifting rather than because I mean, growing up, Metallica, Pantera, I was also, as my latest episode of the podcast, I was a huge Obituary fan. I was a huge Deicide fan.
Right.
Listening to all that stuff too. So I guess that's what always makes for a funny guest list on my podcast because, a lot of new metal guys, but at the same time, I'm like, I'll jump on a chance to talk to a dude in Deicide or Obituary.
Well, that really worked out for you, though, right? Like with the Deicide one. I listened to that a few weeks ago. Kind of because I had heard about it. I heard about it before I even did podcasting or anything like that, and I was like, "There's this podcast, and Glenn Benton from Deicide's on it, and he talks a bunch of shit on Slipknot, and like it became this big thing, and it was so funny too." Because I was listening to it, and I was like, he doesn't even say anything about Slipknot, and like Glenn just kind of pushes it,
Yeah, I was honestly, man, that whole conversation, and not to jump off topic, but we were, I was just like, who would I like to talk to? And Glenn was obviously one of those guys when I was, I was 12 listening to Deicide, and upside down crosses burnt in dude's forehead, and obviously, all my friends were like, dude, you gotta get Glenn. So I reached out to their label, and I'm like, hey, I'd really love to talk to Glenn Benton. Can we make that happen? And they said, yeah, man, it should be no problem. And I was sitting on my couch one day, and I get an email from his publicist, and he's like, Glenn will be ready in 15 minutes. And normally any other time of day, you tell me 15 minutes, I'm not gonna be able to do it. I have kids, I have work. But it just so happened I was home, and I looked at my wife, and I was like, I can call Glenn Benton in 10 minutes. I gotta do this. And so I came down to the basement, called him up, talked to him for whatever. And as soon as he said that, Slipknot can, or Corey Taylor, blow me and all this stuff, it I knew as soon as he said it, I was like, that's the Blabbermouth headline right there.
Oh yeah.
And actually, I reached out to him through his publicist again for my episode 100 because I was going to have him come back on.
Right.
I was trying to find like a good celebratory 100th guest, and he wrote me back saying, he's like, Glenn actually doesn't like to do press, and that on the last album cycle, I was the only interview he did.
Oh, wow.
I was like, wow.
Okay.
I wrote him back. I was like, well, at least we did our job.
It's a big honor, though. I mean, that he talked to you and didn't talk to anybody else. Yeah,
that was crazy.
That was honestly one of my favorite episodes because Glenn Benton, he's just a character, man, and
yeah, right.
Just hearing what he had to say about stuff was just it was a lot of fun for me, especially because I came from a really big Christian background, so I remember being younger and listening to stuff like Deicide and people being like, how can you relate this to your views on Christianity and all that? And I was like, man, it's a band and it shreds, and I don't have to be limited by what their lyrical content is. That's him, that's not me. And so it didn't bother my enjoyment of the music at all. And
well, I think with all that stuff, you can only take it at face value anyway. It's not like you're going to start, sacrificing lambs just because you listen to a certain album. I mean, I always wanted my music to have a little bit of an evil side to it. So, I mean, how much more evil can you get than Glenn Benton? It's not like I listened to it immediately, began worshiping Satan or anything like that.
Where can I buy a good-sized pentagram to wear around my neck? Yeah.
Right.
Amazon.com.
Right, yeah, you can get them in 2 days or less.
Back then it would probably have been, Spencer Gifts or something.
Right. Yeah, I think we actually still have a Spencer Gifts at our local mall. St. Louis is I don't know if you remember, but St. Louis is still very tied to the new metal movement. Everybody in St. Louis it's all Tool, Korn, Deftones,
Limp Bizkit.
Limp Bizkit. It is still to this day. We were trying to play hardcore in St. Louis. It was really more modern, part of more what you would call the screamo or metalcore movement at that time. That was our band, and we kept when we would play shows, every other band would sound like Deftones, or they would sound like Mudvayne, or they it was and this is in 2006 2007, well beyond those bands, I guess, quote unquote expiration dates.
Well, that shit still gets tons of radio play out here. It's insane.
Well, I thought it was kind of odd that the Guns N' Roses just announced their show there, and Deftones are opening.
Yeah, that's weird. Yeah.
because they're only picking, a certain couple of bands for, here and there. It's not like they're getting the entire tour, so they pick the Deftones for that market.
Right.
But I mean, growing up in Nashville, we would take a lot of road trips to St. Louis, not only to play, like I said earlier, with bands like Big Blue Monkey and Low Cash and all those bands back in the 90s, but we'd also go and see. I went and saw Deftones with, man, it was a great show. It was Deftones, Snapcase, and Quicksand at
oh, dude, that sounds like awesome.
I was like, was that the American Theater or something like that?
Where the hell was I during that? Yeah.
But yeah, and what an amazing bill. Like,
Snapcase, for sure.
Snapcase is another one of those bands I loved. But yeah, so we would go see, I think I saw Family Values there too.
Well, and like Deftones, especially being a band, like Korn that, is heavily credited with being the originators of nu metal, but like the more you look at Deftones, the more you're like, yeah, it's not really. I mean, you look at like Adrenaline, yeah, I could see that being nu metal, but I mean, anything beyond the fur on is something else entirely,
Yeah, I remember I worked in a used record store in high school, and had a couple friends that would come in, and they would, man, Korn's great. And I'm like, yeah, but if you like Korn, you got to check out this band called Deftones. And
right.
And I sold a few copies of Adrenaline, and I actually had a friend of mine reach out to me not too long ago, and he was like, I still want to say thank you for turning me on to the Deftones back in the day. I'm like, wow, that was years ago. But yeah, Deftones, they definitely went their own way. But I think that first album, even around the fur a little bit, and then even Back to School and White Pony, they still had their new elements tinged to them, but
sure.
Even recently they've come out and kind of poo-pooed that, and they've always kind of turned their back on the nu metal side of it, not wanting to be lumped into that category, but they're definitely in that nu metal category, no matter if they want to believe it or not. Right.
Well, in the nu metal category, Joe and I went and saw American Standards in Kansas City this week, and needless to say, we spent a lot of time in the car, and we did like a nu metal playlist, and one of the biggest things we noticed is like a lot of these nu metal bands, they don't really sound like each other, and there's not really like a unifying sound, I think. So like I think it's one of those things where nu metal is, as much as people like to use it as a genre descriptor, doesn't really hold up to scrutiny when you really, you look at the originators of the style, don't really play that style, and all that. So like, because we were like, Korn doesn't really sound like Deftones. Limp Bizkit doesn't really sound like Korn. Slipknot doesn't sound like any of those bands.
It's kind of a unifying name in the sense that any band that doesn't fit the mold of another genre, you can just call them nu metal and get away with it.
Yeah, to an extent. I think we were talking a little bit about 80s glam. They all pretty much they did sound like each other. They all had their little quirks about them, but for the most part, they'd have a heavy song, they'd have a ballad, they'd have this, a guitar, like a guitar player that could shred, like a Don Dokken or Vito Bratta or something like that. But then you got nu metal, like you said, where Korn doesn't sound like Deftones, Deftones doesn't sound like Fear Factory, Fear Factory doesn't sound like this. You kind of had your staples being your down-tuned guitar and your I had BC Coachman of Nonpoint on. We were joking about lots of zeros and ones. If you're into Guitar Tab, it was a lot of opens and zeros and ones.
Oh yeah,
like brown and down and in. But it was just a fun time a bit. But another parallel to the the glam metal thing too with nu metal is you had the fashion, and the fashion I think did kind of lump everyone in together with your Jinkos and your baggy Dickies and your your Adidas tracksuits and shell-toed Adidas and things like that. So I mean, it may not have sounded the same, but I think in a lot of aspects it looked the same. Windbreakers and things like that.
Right. Yeah, I had it all, man. It was not unusual for me to go and drop like $300 at a Hot Topic, during that time.
And you were sick in the head mixing it with grunge with the flannel shirts and everything.
Well, you know what? It's weird because, so like I started with grunge, and that's another style that doesn't really hold up to scrutiny. Like, when you really think about it, it's like, okay, so they're all from Seattle, so they're grunge, like that doesn't make any sense. But, Alice in Chains doesn't sound like Nirvana. Nirvana doesn't really sound like Soundgarden. Like it doesn't. Pearl Jam doesn't really sound like any of those bands. So it's weird hearing people say, "Oh, that's all grunge music." So if you listen to that, you should have a wallet chain and a pair of Jinkos. But yeah, so like I got into nu metal pretty quickly after grunge. Like, I mean, Joe had showed me like stuff like Metallica and Megadeth and Slayer and stuff like that, and I liked all that stuff. But what I liked about nu metal was that it just really helped me at the time, because I got picked on really bad in high school, like in middle school, elementary and stuff like that, and listening to the Korn songs that were about that, really, I identified with that on a really personal level. But it's really weird too, because like nu metal being such a huge category, it's like you're gonna lump bands like Korn and like Linkin Park and like Seven Dust with Mudvayne.
Right.
Like Mudvayne is like this like super technical band. At least they were on their debut.
Yeah.
Yeah, LD50 is that was my return to metal was actually on LD50. Hearing Ryan Martini just freaking did it for me.
Oh yeah, that first album. I remember when a buddy of mine had Dig on VHS, and it was like, it was some sort of documentary. It was like they had the video, then they had the making of the video. I think they also had like playthroughs from each member of the video, since it was it was a lot of solo shots.
Yeah,
but yeah, we were like totally blown away by those guys. And actually, when I'm going to do this a lot, by the way, when I'm on other podcasts, I'm always like, well, when I had this guest on, but
you're good, man. Travis did it too.
Well, Travis is allowed to do that, but
he's a man.
That's right. He is the man.
Yep.
Talk about crush.
Shout out to Trav Turner as the story grows. But
check it out.
Right. Who did I have on? I lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
When I had Fallon Bowman of Kitty on, we were talking about they were on tour with Mudvayne, and just being able to see those guys. And actually, that's the one time I saw Kitty was opening for Mudvayne at a small club in Tennessee. But yeah, those guys, when they came out, everybody kind of gave them the Slipknot write off to begin with, but I think they held their own. They held their own over time.
Yeah, I mean that was my original. Whenever Joe actually burned me a copy of Mudvayne LD50, and then I bought it like 2 days after that. But I remember being like, well, this is just like Slipknot. Why should I listen to this and not, instead of Slipknot? But it, obviously it was different. And,
I believe I falsely categorized it as it's Slipknot with jazz chords.
Right.
It's probably not too bad. That's not too false, I guess.
It's funny too, because like I hold LD50 at this point in my life like way higher than I hold, Slipknot's self-titled record, and even though that was just really like ridiculous. Was that 97 or 99, Joe?
For LD50?
No, Slipknot.
Slipknot would have been 98 or 99.
Okay.
Yeah, LD50 is 2000.
In the 2000s, I believe. Yeah,
it's 2000 or 2001 for.
See
LD50.
how good we do our research.
When I first heard of Slipknot, I saw a picture of them before I heard anything, and I was like, oh, this is cool. And then I remember I read an album review of the first album, and the very first line still sticks with me to this day. Just said, "Now this is an insane clown posse." I was like, "Wow!"
Wow. Yikes! Insane.
Because we always
posse,
joked. I mean, how can you truly have a posse when there's only 2 dudes? But.
Right? Yeah, these guys got 9 guys, and they're all fucking serious.
And nobody knew about Mushroom Head until like 3 years later.
Yeah, Mushroom Head came real late to the game. Yeah. But according to them, they've been doing that shit since how long? Like 10 years prior.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing with Mushroom Head, and I've heard many different interviews with those guys and Slipknot, and was it a rip off or was it like collective thinking? Just in what is it, shared thinking, or I don't know what shared consciousness? I mean, in all honesty, I mean when I was late 90s in Nashville, I mean we honestly had a band practice between my old band, another band, and a couple of other friends, and we had 8 dudes in the band. We had 2 singers, a guitar player, bass player, drummer. We were going to do a DJ and a keyboard player, and this is all prior to Slipknot. So I mean, I think it was just something, and it was something in the air. I don't think it was necessarily, we were like, hey, this band out of Cleveland called Mushroom Head's doing this doing this thing. Let's rip them off. I think it was just maybe a sign of the times or just something going on around there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was collective thinking too, because it seemed like in the late 90s, everybody had kind of this like Kiss Psycho Circus mindset, where it was like, we're going to do the clown. Like clowns were like huge in the 90s for some reason.
Right.
I don't even know why, but
it was
like
right after It.
Yeah, right after It, with Tim Curry, like it was just
Pennywise.
Everybody wanted to do that clown, and I think like Batman's Joker had a lot to do with that because there was a really successful '90s Batman cartoon that was going on at the time, and everybody loved like Mark Hamill's Joker character, and I think that mixed with like the you take Kiss's image with heavy metal, and obviously like for whatever reason it sounded like a really good idea to everybody at the time,
Right. Heading back to let's jump back to Limp Bizkit real quick because I know you hate them, but
oh yeah,
let's get it out of the way.
Let's get the hate out. Yeah.
This Limp Bizkit is probably one of my all-time favorite live bands I've ever seen in my life. By the way, I saw them prior to $3 Bill Y'all. They actually were opening for Korn and Helmet together. It was Korn, Helmet, and Limp Bizkit, and we got to the venue as I think Limp Bizkit was playing Faith. We're like,
okay,
I walked in and my friend's like, dude, they're playing George Michael's Faith. This is crazy. And we go and watch the show. And, man, when I was in my teenage years, I was totally the dude that hung around the buses and waited for hours for autographs and shaking hands, things like that.
Sure,
prior to playing in bands, I was always, a buddy of mine, another friend of mine, we would sit and just, it almost became a game. It was like a hide and go seek kind of game. Like, can we meet the band?
Sure.
Kind of stuff. But we go and hang around Korn's buses. Limp Bizkit's out there handing out little cassette samplers of their album that's about to come out.
Sure.
And man, we wore that cassette out. It was so crazy. It had like Stuck on it and a couple of other songs. And then a couple of months after $3 Bill Y'all comes out, it's announced that Limp Bizkit's coming to Nashville at a small club. And I go down to the venue, and I literally told the club owner, I was like, if you want people in this venue, you will put my band on the bill, because nobody knew who they were. And but man, we promoted the hell out of that show, and I've still got video of Fred, kind of calling out my old band from the stage. And a side note story I think I've told before, but he comes up to me after the show, and he goes, "Hey man, I've got this studio in Florida. I'd love for you to come down and do some demos. You guys were great. You guys had a lot of stuff to see some potential. But at the time, even though we were big fans, we didn't really know Fred Durst. He wasn't Fred Durst yet. He was still the dude from Limp Bizkit.
Yeah.
So a few years later, I'm reading an article with Stained, and Stained had opened for them after we did on that same tour, and Aaron Lewis is like, yeah, man, Fred came up to me after the show. He goes, I have a studio in Florida.
Oh, man.
I'd love for you to come down and do some demos. I see a lot of potential with you guys. And we jumped on the opportunity, and we, and the rest is history. And I'm like, oh,
well,
man.
Shit. That's hilarious.
So that's my Limp Bizkit story.
So the nice stuff that I'm going to say about Limp Bizkit is that, like, first of all, no matter what anybody that's listening to this podcast right now may think about Limp Bizkit now in 2017, back then they were kind of the shit. Yeah, you can say whatever you want to say about how they're douchebags and that Fred Durst created this persona that followed people. Anybody that dresses like Fred Durst now is going to get fucking, crucified, if they act like that or whatever. But, when $3 Bill Y'all came out, it was like, I remember listening to it and really liking it and thinking it was just fucking great. And, I liked how angry the lyrics were, and I liked that it was like hip hop, but with, metal in the background, and all this stuff. And, maybe it's easy to say now that like, oh, well, it wasn't really metal. It was new metal or whatever. Like it's just one of those like old guy statements where it's like, you would have had to have just been around back then. Mm-hmm. To really understand why Limp Bizkit was popular, why they did as well as they could. Fred Durst was an extremely energetic vocalist. He was really positive about reaching out to other bands, like Stained, like to your band, like it was one of those, like he wanted to take what they were doing and take it on a national level. And it was extremely ambitious, and it was positive, and it was a good vibe.
Yeah, the dude was a hell of an entrepreneur. Knew how to market.
Yeah,
he was.
And he landed a job as basically like the A&R guy for what level was it? Def Jam Records.
Either that or like Flip Interscope or something.
Yeah, like he was a big deal. Like he was basically like raking in money from that and from his band. So like,
I remember there was a time whenever there was the talk of him taking over for Hugh Hefner.
Oh yeah.
With,
he'd have done it too. Yeah, for sure.
Well, with that guy, with Fred Durst, meeting him when I opened for him. Literally, I graduated high school, and then like 2 months later, we opened for Limp Bizkit. Like we were, that's how kind of quickly it kind of came along. But
it's badass though, at least at that time.
Yeah, it was good. He had that it factor, like if you that magnetism that some people just have, and honestly, I hadn't met anyone else like that until I met Bobby Burns from Primer 55. I actually met them randomly at a show. Like they were supposed to open for Stained, but Stained ended up canceling, and Primer so Primer played an extended set, and then I met Bobby after. And this is when I was in my local rock star phase, and I'll go up to Bobby and talk to him for a little bit, and he just had it too. It was such a crazy thing to be around. And so when I got the opportunity to even audition for Primer, I jumped at it because I'm like, this guy's going places kind of thing.
Oh yeah. Honestly, like, and I'm surprised actually that Primer didn't get bigger than they did, because I listen to those records and I don't hear anything that's like, okay, this is what's holding them back, or
right.
like I didn't have that moment where I was like, this is gonna sound dated, or it's like I could still listen to more so on the new release than the first album. But I hear the new release, and there was a lot more experimentation with sound and stuff on it. And I think that was more of like a little bit more timeless than the first album. And I think that I don't know. I just think Primer was definitely, like you said, if it hadn't been for the 9/11 stuff and the weird shift in music that took place after that, I think they would have been a household name, 100%. And they were to some people. I mean, shit, our local radio station on the Point still plays Primer 55.
Yeah, at least twice a day.
Oh, yeah.
That's crazy. I didn't know that. Bobby had always joked that he wished that I would have joined the band earlier, because honestly, by the time I joined the band, they were so dysfunctional.
Right.
Like it was one of the most dysfunctional vans going down the highway ever.
Sure.
Bobby and Jason hated each other. Bobby and Preston hated each other. They all hated me. Like I was starting to hate them because, I had toured, most of the country in my band out of Tennessee.
Right.
But when it came time to, when we started doing actual national tours in Primer, we toured with Dope at one point, and just, a lot of that type stuff, doing the bigger tours, I'm like, here I am, let's do this. It's about time.
Right.
But then at one point it just became like, this is what it is. This is what I get to do. It was just so much like venom and hatred going on in that band. And then we ended up breaking up shortly after that in like early 2003.
Right.
And then 2007 came around, and we actually did another about 6-week run. And it was more of the same, and Bobby ended up keeping the name and kind of doing he was the only original member for a long time,
right?
Until he finally, I think he finally shut it down. I think in 2015.
Wow, that went on a long time. Because even in 2003, I think you may have noticed too, like when you're playing shows, that there's probably like kind of a shift in the music, like in the sense that people weren't really looking for that sound as much, because I remember like
right.
pop punk had exploded.
Pop punk, emo was huge.
And then pop punk, thankfully led to, more of this, like they started incorporating more screaming into the music, and then you ended up with like the screamo stuff. And then, which eventually, people were willing to give bands like As I Lay Dying and Killswitch Engage, like they're willing to give those bands a chance, which is funny because I listen to those bands. And a really good example I like to use is Il Nino. Mm-hmm. Il Nino started off as kind of a more nu metal band that had no issue just moving straight on into the metalcore stuff. Like they literally just did what they did before, but added a little bit more of like that Swedish Gothenburg type shit that was, it's not shit. We're going to be talking about it literally tomorrow, but it's they had no trouble transitioning. I think Slipknot had a little bit of trouble transitioning out of what they were known for, but kind of really came back in a huge way. They were unstoppable. Mudvayne kind of stayed relevant somehow too. Like bands like Disturbed stayed relevant, and Korn stayed relevant. But they like, it seemed like they were all doing so much to try to differentiate themselves from where they started. Which is kind of sad.
It's kind of funny. We had transitioned in Primer, and our last tour we did, it was kind of funny. If you look back on pictures and stuff of that tour, I've got dyed jet black straightened hair with eyeliner and black nail polish, and we're all in black, and we looked like emo kids.
Sure.
But prior to emo being a thing, it was kind of funny. Music was kind of taking that direction, and even on that Primer tour, we're out there playing new metal, but in the van, we're listening to all the pop punk, and even the all the early days of like metalcore, and even through all that, like I said earlier, I was listening to Snapcase and Hatebreed and all that stuff too. So it was always kind of funny to be in a new metal band when you're all over the place musically, like I've always been. But talking about Stained, I think that they were one of the bands that were able to write good songs, and they had their new metal moments, but I think at the core of the band, they were always just a good singer-songwriter kind of band.
Sure. I mean, Aaron Lewis has been making huge waves in country music,
yeah, that's crazy
lately, which it's crazy. But if you really think about it, if you look at the songs by Stain that were the most successful, I mean, sure, Mud Shovel was cool, Raw was cool, Break the Cycle. Break the Cycle's a really interesting album in that everybody bought it, but they bought it for like the acoustic songs. They bought it for It's Been a While and Epiphany and Outside and all that. And it's weird hearing that, because like you listen to the other songs on Break the Cycle and they sound like the same shit that was on Dysfunction, like.
Right. Yeah, they were always a band that he's definitely not too far fetched from what he did in Stained, and even to if Fred Durst would have gone country, everybody would probably give him the old cockeye or something, or
sure,
or a country Jonathan Davis album or something. But Aaron Lewis going country, you're like, yeah, that sounds about right.
Right. Worked out for Kid Rock.
Yeah, true.
Everybody loves Kid Rock in the country, scene.
Yeah, that guy he was able to just go through all boundaries of music. It's insane, that guy's career. I was never a huge fan, but always kind of kept up and respected what he did, but not necessarily something I listened to.
Right. Well, and it's weird too that like we talked about Insane Clown Posse earlier. It's kind of weird too that a lot of the bands that played nu metal or continued to play nu metal throughout the 2000s kind of started being like adopted by the ICP community.
Yeah.
Like Mushroom Head, I think just recently played like a Juggalo festival and all that stuff. And it's hard for me to talk about because I have like, if I could have like a negative respect for a group, it would be the Insane Clown Posse. Like I don't get it. I don't want to get it. I don't, I've moved on from that. Like I understand why they were popular in the 90s, but like the people that are still around that still swear by them, that are like, in their 40s and like, I work as a broadband technician, but on the weekends I put, con makeup on and I go and see Mushroom Head and, I go and see Mushroom Head and ICP play it. It's like, what the fuck is that? Like,
Yeah, it's funny. The Gathering of the Juggalos, if you look at the lineup, every year they have a couple of bands. You're like, wow, I can't believe that band's playing there. Or they have comedians that you would never think that would go and do a Gathering of the Juggalos type thing.
Right.
And actually, the last show Primer played before I joined was the 2002 Gathering of the Juggalos.
Wow. And I could see that, though.
The first show they played after I left was the 2008 Gathering of the Juggalos. So I never actually got to play it. I was one show off on both ends of my career.
Well, maybe you're lucky. I don't know. Like it's weird. Like I'm not like here to talk shit on ICP because I mean I guess they like murder people or whatever. That that's according to them. That's what they do. But
according to their lyrics,
right? Yeah. But according to their lyrics too, they don't know how like magnets work, and it's sort of that's what blew my mind. Like, because I remember being in high school and like everybody in my high school was like really into ICP, and like I could get away like if I wore a Slipknot shirt or something, they'd be like, all right, this guy's okay, But like I remember it being this kind of weird time where like I remember I was hanging out with a couple of my buddies. And I think I told my parents I'd be home at like 9 p.m. or something, but there was this ICP show that was that night, and I got in the car with these guys, and there was like this 37-year-old guy that was driving. He just like turns around and looks at me like real serious, like dead fucking serious, like, "Are you down with the clown?" And I was like, what? I got to be at church on Sunday. What are you talking about? Like, this is weird, And I went, it was just one of those really weird situations where I was like, I don't like this. And it's weird because like I'd been talked into going into like, going to shows like that, like I would go and see Slayer, or I'd go and see Deicide if they came to town, or, like all these bands that were just like really, not what the most popular, the popular opinion was at the time. And I remember all that being weird, but I remember just this impression that Insane Clown Posse left on me where I was like really turned off by this idea of like this like tough guy aspect of it all. Like all these guys are like, they're like nerds, they're rejects or whatever, but they are like super tough and they'll beat your ass and they're a group and they'll get, like, I remember just thinking all that stuff was really shitty. And then I ran into that a lot with Slipknot fans too early on, that like, they're like, yeah, we're maggots. We have, Slipknot patches on our wallets. And I was like, dude, I like Slipknot. Like, what's the problem? And they're like, yeah, but you need to really get into the lyrics or whatever. And I was like, dude, the lyrics are just fucking drivel, like, it's I'm angry at this, or I'm angry at that, or fuck God this, or fuck Jesus that. And, it was like, yeah, I mean, I understand maybe why they feel that way, but I'm not like, at that time, right. I remember with nu metal not being like all that, like, I liked the music. I didn't like the lyrics as much because it just seemed like really tough, really fake, really weird, and like with the rapcore bands, like I didn't live on the street. I didn't live, and with nu metal, I always felt like nu metal was targeted more towards like people like me that lived in the suburbs and,
right.
wore backwards baseball caps and Jinko shorts and, and stuff like that. So it was a really odd time, and the amount of like fanaticism that came from the fans, it shocks me that it was such a huge movement.
Well, I think you're hitting on it and you just don't even realize it. You talked about all these people, they're rejects.
Sure.
And they're actually having a place to belong.
Sure.
I mean, that's really what it is. I mean, I'm not a big ICP guy at all, but I get it. I mean, they're pretty smart. I mean, they're giving these people that don't feel like they fit in anywhere a place to go, to do their thing, and feel like they belong to a group. And whenever somebody who's a reject, or an outsider, because I was an outsider in high school, and you give them a sense of belonging, they are going to fight for it tooth and nail. And yeah, they're going to be fanatical about it because they don't want to lose that feeling. They don't want to let it go.
Sure.
And that's the reason why people are juggalos.
Right.
Whether you like the music, whether you like what they stand for or not, I mean, I think that has a lot to do with it, is because it gives them a sense of belonging.
Well, not so much on the juggalo side, but I guess my biggest question about all of that is that why is it that in 2002, 2003, everybody literally just collectively stopped giving a fuck? Like, that's the thing I don't understand about nu metal, is that it's literally at its height as, it was at that time, it was metal. Nobody fucking called it nu metal when I was in high school. Nobody's like, oh, this is nu metal. You don't want to listen to this. Like, it was literally just, it was the metal, I guess, of like our day, like, nobody really questioned as to whether it was metal.
The term nu metal being thrown around. But it's not like I ever went out like, yeah, I'm in a new metal band. I mean, now I was in a new metal band, but
sure.
Back then it wasn't like, yeah, we're new metal. People always be like, what kind of music are you? Like, oh, we're heavy. We're kind of like Korn or something. But
right.
But I lost my train of thought here. So back 2003, 2002, 2003. I mean, we kind of talked about it earlier. A whole lot of it was at the time. It was just oversaturation. There were so many just carbon copies of this, that, and the other thing coming out. I mean, it ran its course. I mean, roughly, if you think about it, first Korn album is 94.
Right.
The birth of new metal, all that stuff in 92, 93 is all kind of coming to a head.
Right.
You got a 10-year run in there. I mean, a 10-year run for any genre of music is going to explode at one point or implode.
Right.
That's like the glam stuff. The glam stuff ended. 89, 90, 91. It got to a peak, and then all of a sudden it just Warrant and Cinderella and all those guys just started putting out garbage albums.
Right.
And then you get a little known band Nirvana comes along.
Right.
And I was watching MTV at the time. My friend had it. I didn't have it. We were poor, but I was at his house and we were watching MTV and Nevermind and Smells Like Teen Spirit came on and Pearl Jam's Alive started coming on and it just felt different. Like it just felt like music was changing because even though I was only 9, 10, 11 at the end of the glam era, my cousins that were older than me were listening to it and check this band out. They're called Firehouse and check this one out. They're called, Winger. And I was into it. I thought it was kind of cool, but, and I wanted to play music, but I actually, funny that later on I ended up wearing eyeliner and nail polish, but at the time I was like, man, if you got to dress like a girl to play music, I'm not doing that.
Right.
And so it actually deterred me from playing music until I heard Metallica and I was like, all right, I'm going to play bass like Cliff Burton. But
power to you.
But
that's a good person.
Yeah, that's a good person. No question about that.
No, not at all. But I gotta love Cliff Burton. But yeah, at the time, I mean, what it was, I think it was just it's oversaturation. It just became almost a parody of itself. And then, 2003, 2004, you're starting to see Lamb of God pop up and Killswitch Engage, and all these bands are starting to come out and like actually play metal again. And I think it was just time. I think Atreyu brought the guitar solo back, and Avenged Sevenfold brought the guitar solo back, and it just came back around again. I think it was just a new generation of fans.
Yeah, I think so too. I think I remember getting into 2006, 2007, and I graduated high school out of, I guess, 2004, so I would have been graduating a little bit after the new metal movement.
I keep forgetting how much older I am.
Yeah, I know you're an old fart, Geoff. But I remember our band. We had a band that played like a new metal-ish style, starting off, and we played at our high school, and I remember the first year we played, it was like new metal, like Linkin Park had just become huge, and we, unless my timeline's all fucked up, but I remember everybody liked that melodic vocal or whatever, and so I did that. I would sing or whatever, and people liked it, and they were all into it or whatever. So like literally a year later, we came back, I guess in was it 2004, Joe, or was it 3? 3, okay. We played again, and we were the same band, and I had been listening to shit like Norma Jean and Converge and all this stuff. So like we get up on stage and like literally all the singing's gone, and I'm just the whole time, and it was just like chaos and feedback and stuff. I remember all these dudes in Slipknot shirts were like, because St. Louis is like really fucking behind, so like, all these dudes in Slipknot shirts are like, dude, what song you guys should cover? You should cover that song, "Let the Bodies Hit the Floor" by Drowning Pool, and it'd be so cool or whatever. And I'd be all like, well, the shit that we played was like way heavier than that, like, do you guys listen to good metal? And that was the beginning of my asshole elitist days. Like, nice. Yeah. Everybody has them, whether they want to admit it or not. Whenever they start listening to music that they identify with stronger than what they had before, there's this almost denial, of, oh no, man, I was never into shit like that. Like. Even though, it's like, dude, 2 years ago, you used to come to school in like big baggy pants and Adidas shirts, and, you had these wallet chains and shit, like, but I mean, what the fuck is that?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it changed. It changed dramatically over 2004 to 2007, 2008. The whole baggy pants were gone, and you were wearing girl jeans and all this other nonsense. So yeah, it was a cosmic shift in the world. And actually, that almost cements what I was saying earlier about for a long time it was not cool to say I was in Primer 55. It was kind of like almost a black mark because of people that were into it at one point became a metal elitist. And like, oh, well, you're in a new metal band, fuck you.
Sure,
and then now we're back around again to where we're all old people. And, it's like, wow, that was cool. You were in a new metal band. It's same thing, man. The band I kind of reference, it's a band called 12 Volt Negative Earth. We were out of Nashville. We had a couple albums out. It was a fun band to be in, but we actually did I don't know how long ago I told this story on the podcast, but when I was in high school, Fred Corey, the drummer of Cinderella, moved to my suburb of Nashville, which is Hendersonville, Tennessee. It's where Johnny Cash was from. Lived. And that's where all that stuff. So I grew up in Hendersonville, graduated Hendersonville High School, and my senior year of high school, there was a used record store in a strip mall that I would go to every day after school. Mm-hmm. And this dude that worked there, Mike Richards, I would just pick his brain every day. I mean, he was probably, honestly, to this day, I don't know how much older he was. He was probably maybe in his 30s, maybe late 20s. I don't know. When you're 17, everybody over 20 is
old,
ancient. But man, I would go in there every day and pick his brain. He would tell me about Vinnie Vincent and, all kinds of crazy stuff. Nice. And one day I walked in there and he goes, man, Fred Corey from Cinderella was just in here. He just moved to town and he built a gigantic studio, and he's looking for bands to produce. I gave him your number, and I'm like, oh, that's awesome. And
because he recorded you guys, right?
Yeah, he recorded the first early demos and then our second EP. And actually, we opened for Cinderella at Pops in 1997.
That's fucking
which is
awesome.
Fucking crazy. We actually opened for Earth Crisis. Or we opened for Cinderella, and then 2 days later we opened for Earth Crisis on the same tour. Yeah, that's the late '90s for you in a nutshell.
You guys stopped eating meat after that, right?
No, we didn't. We actually we play. There's a video of us watching them, and our singer was like, screaming about meat or something. I don't know. It was really stupid. But
I'm gonna go eat a big fucking steak right now, buddy. Yeah.
We were much younger at the time.
Sure.
But what I was getting at was, even though Cinderella had just broke up, maybe 3 or 4 years earlier, 90. I think they did their last stuff in like 94.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, they were still at their height only 4 or 5 years earlier.
Right.
But to us, they were washed up, has-beens, and stuff like that. And
it's old school. It's dad metal.
We knew, we knew that the night songs and stuff was kind of cool. But at the time, we're like, like whatever.
Yeah.
And then now looking back on it, I'm like, wow, we actually worked with Fred. It's kind of
right.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, like now it's like really cool, Like then it was like, because I think nowadays, I guess because there's so many older guys doing podcasts and doing blogs and doing stuff like that, there's a certain sense of like, no man, all this shit that I used to like is actually really cool. And if you listen to because I guess a lot of the more modern metal stuff is more classically metal based, I think people build a little bit more of an appreciation for stuff like that. Whereas with new metal, it was like almost a straight rejection of hair metal,
Oh yeah, absolutely. And at one point, we actually lost our drummer, and Fred wanted to be in the band.
Oh shit!
And we actually said no to him.
Oh my god!
Because we didn't want to be, 12 Volt Negative Earth featuring Fred Corey of Cinderella. Like, even back then, we'd be like, yeah, Fred Corey from Cinderella produced our album, and we'd get like somebody looking at us cross-eyed. Just
okay,
like,
great. So so for the show, should we have a whole bunch of hairspray ready?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's funny looking back and how that stuff, how that stuff makes it seem funny. In an odd parallel, like even when Mike Portnoy joined Avenged Sevenfold, it was still that was even kind of weird,
That was super weird. Yeah, I remember being like, "What the fuck is?"
Time.
Yeah. I remember that being really odd.
And then he would come to shows and he would just get up there and play one song.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
All right, Josh, settle an argument that no one in this room is having. Is Rage Against the Machine new metal?
Oh.
I would lump them in the new metal category. I wouldn't see why not. I think they have all the elements, and they were probably one of the fathers of it. those guys, and the first Rage Against the Machine album. Honestly, I remember seeing those videos and just thinking it was garbage, and then a couple of years later, it kind of clicked, and I was like, wow, this is actually really awesome. But the whole repetitive lyrics and screaming, things like that—that's a staple of nu metal. So yeah, they were definitely nu metal.
I think it was an influence for sure, if anything.
They're still one of the few bands that when I listen to them, it doesn't sound dated to me, even though I know some of this shit came out in '92.
I think it sounds like '92, but that's just me. Their later stuff sounds a little bit better, but
no, that first album, I still listen to the shit out of that thing. That thing's amazing.
Yeah,
it's great. It's great. Probably one of the best debut albums of all time.
For sure.
I would agree with that.
Well, the influence of it is undeniable on nu metal too. Like just. Nobody was really doing that, like the hip hop and
spoken word. And all
that
stuff.
Dude, it was different. It was cool.
Guitar noises.
Yeah.
I still listen to it because that's like my high school days. So that makes me feel young.
I remember a few years ago online, there was a video of like their second show ever showed up online, and it sounds like the first album. I was like, did they not have a bad? Did they not start out like every other band and sound like shit?
Yeah, weren't they shitty before that? Like everyone's supposed to be shitty,
Yeah, it was like their second show ever. They're playing like a college, cafeteria during the day. It's like all this other stuff, but the music on stage sounds like the first album, and you're like, man, motherfucker,
right? So I can't do a podcast for some reason without mentioning Christian rock bands and. I don't know what it is. I think it's my upbringing. It's where I started, I guess. I'm one of those weird guys that's a metal commentator that started with Christian metal, because that's all I was allowed to listen to, when I was younger. And so anytime I would go listen to something like Slayer or Slipknot or whatever, it was like a rebellion, like.
Nice.
And that was better than me. My grandmother used to buy me Carmen CDs, if you remember who Carmen is.
I got a funny story about Carmen that I'm going to save for a different podcast. But but have you ever heard of a band called Project 86?
Yeah, I remember those guys.
Yeah, they so let's say you're a kid in high school and everybody loves Slipknot and Static X and Mudvayne and shit. And then this band called Project 86 comes out on Atlantic or Tooth and Nail Records. Whether it was like a joint release or whatever, their album Drawing Black Lines, which I would still heavily consider to be a nu metal album, was literally like the best fucking thing that I had heard up to that point coming out of it. I mean, like you had POD and stuff before that, but POD always came off to me, and even to this day, still very kind of cheesy and which is really weird though because
their newest release wasn't that bad actually. Their newest release was actually pretty good, I thought.
Well, POD was weird in that like I could never figure out how that band got as popular as they did. Like they were.
They were the band that made it through 9/11, and honestly, they were probably one of the few bands that almost made a career because of 9/11 because of Alive.
Right.
I mean, that was like the anthem of the 2 days after. I mean, it's just like you could not have picked a better song to release, and on crazy to say for a tragedy like that to happen, but I mean that became basically the anthem of we're all still here, we're all still alive, and everybody wanted to sing about it and have something somewhat positive. So yeah, they were of all the bands that talk about 9/11 ruining careers, and a friend of mine's album came out on 9/11. That was a Tuesday.
So did Satellite by POD.
Yeah,
came out on
right. Yeah, so that they pretty much benefited from a tragedy like that, to where her album pretty much went into the tank because all the record labels were in New York. I mean, the entire city shut down for months, and any kind of push promotion you were about to have was pretty much shot.
It was gone,
I know a lot of people use that as kind of a crutch, like, oh well, if it wasn't for 9/11, that we wouldn't have this, we wouldn't have that. But I think in a lot of ways it was true.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's great about POD, they launched Katy Perry's career.
Did they?
There you go.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, she's in
Tell me that story.
Youth of a Nation video, I believe. I think that's the one. Yeah. And she's like a teenager. I'm just having a little fun, but yeah.
I know they had that video for Boom that had Blindside. They were playing ping pong against the band Blindside in their video. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a favorite of mine. Silence. Yeah, that's a great album.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those are like those weird nu metal albums that were still okay after September 11th. And I think it was just because, like, I think it was, honest to God, was because they were Christian albums and they gave people hope, I guess, or whatever. It was like one of those, like, for the first time in like decades, everybody wasn't focusing on like the negative aspects of that. They were focusing more on the spiritual. Or I think everybody got a lot.
Yeah, there was like a whole slew of Christian bands that got real popular.
Yeah, America became much more. I don't want to say Christian because
they became more spiritual because they were emotional because of what happened. I mean,
right? Yeah, they were more emotional, and everybody became more spiritual, whether that was like a religion or not. I think they heard kind of hopeful lyrics and kind of almost like starry-eyed, because the downside to all of that, I guess, would be like where America is now, which we're not going to go into too much, but because you had all those people that were like really spiritual, but like now in 2017, all the bad aspects of religion are coming out, of the racism and the homophobia and the all that stuff has become like the pinnacle of what people don't want. And but I mean, back at that time, I think everybody was a little bit more united, and I think that's got to be the only reason that bands like that survived, because I don't think that they were really playing a style that was that original, in the sense of there were bands that sounded like POD before POD. There were bands that sounded like Project 86 before Project 86. So there were bands that sounded like Blindside before that, and it was just a really weird thing, because I feel like Christian music didn't really go anywhere before like the metalcore thing,
Oh, absolutely. Speaking of Christian stuff, this is actually kind of funny. My very first thing I ever did radio-wise, and this is the only thing I ever did, I guess technically radio-wise, was there was a college radio station in Hendersonville, actually one town over in Gallatin, but that's too much semantics. But they had a college radio station, and if they didn't have enough students that would take the shifts, you could actually volunteer and go in and do a show. And so I was like, man, I want a show. I want to be able to play, Metallica and Pantera and all that stuff.
Sure, yeah.
And, so I signed up for it, and they're like, all right, well, the only thing we have available is Sunday morning church drive time, whatever. And so I was like, so I took it. I was like, all right, well, I guess I'll get my foot in the door kind of thing. And literally, I got my foot in the door. I mean, they literally I think they gave me a key and showed me how to turn everything on,
right?
And just play gospel, and then the guy that comes in, so I probably only did 4 shows or something. I was like, man, this is really stupid,
right? Yeah.
But
why would I play?
But I kind of learned what I was doing, I guess, at the time, and but the guy that came in after me was like this dude that I was very subdued. I'm like, good morning, everybody, blah blah blah. He came in and just raging, like he took the mic, stood up, was like, put the headphones on, put on some Tourniquet, and just went to town. And he was Tourniquet, like one of the most so like that's the one dude that anytime Trav talks about some of these Trav from As the Story Grows, when he talks about some of the Christian metal guys, I always think about this one DJ that came in after me on Sundays, and for like a 3-hour block he would just play Christian metal, and I would just watch him, because he was a sight to see, do his job, and it was so much fun to watch. I mean, he would play those, the Believers and Tourniquets and all those things. That's my reference point to Christian metal, is that guy.
Yeah, well, that's a good reference point to have, honestly, because that was kind of what was considered the golden era of Christian metal music, because it had kind of reached a point where it wasn't trying to sound like the hair metal bands that were popular at the time. It was actually, you look at a band like Believer, and it's almost hard to believe that that's even like a Christian metal band, because they were so extreme, like for their time period. And I'm going to try to jump off this train as quick as I can, because we always derail into the Christian metal stuff. But me and my friend Buddy, who has been on a few episodes, he's actually going to be on tomorrow night too. Him and I ran it. We did the same thing. It was a college radio station in St. Louis. It was a show called The Fast Lane, and all we played was Christian metal. And it was a lot of fun. I mean, we were dicks. Like when people would call in, we'd be like, "Can you play Project 86 or POD?" We'd be like, "No, fucker, it's As I Lay Dying or nothing." And it was like,
Which in hindsight, you probably should have played the POD and the Project 86.
Right? Yeah. It's like, have you ever wanted to murder your life?
Murder
your wife. Check out As LA Dying. Yeah.
You got to fully express your hatred of Pantera while doing that. Hey man, do you guys play Pantera?
Dude, we got a lot of that shit. Actually, yeah. Like, and we're like, dude, it's a Christian metal show. We're not about stuff like Pantera. They're very anti-religion and all this, which is like totally an act, because like we do that radio show for 2 hours, then I'd go home and I'd be driving home listening to Slayer all the way home, or I would listen to stuff that was very like not that, because to me it's always been about the music and not so much about the lyrics with pretty much everything I've been into. Because I like stuff that's good. I like stuff that I think is relevant, and to say that like, oh well, you can't listen to this band because they have satanic lyrics, or on the flip side, you can't listen to this band because they've got religious lyrics. Like none of that stuff really made sense to me. I was like, if I listen to it and I like it, that's a good enough justification to just keep going with it.
Absolutely, man.
How about we do everybody's favorite new metal band?
Oh shit! Look at you trying to stay on topic.
I know. I'm trying to.
He's bringing it back.
All right, I think I'm gonna have a tie.
Okay.
Okay, you set the rules and say pick a favorite, but now you got a tie.
What the fuck is that? Yeah,
all right, Flaw. Then I won't say.
You like Flaw?
Yeah, I still love Flaw. That first album, man. If it was a tape, I probably would have had to buy it 6 times if it wasn't it. But I was a CD guy. But yeah, I love that thing. Listen to it over and over and over and over again.
What's funny about Flaw is they're from here. They're from Louisville.
Yeah.
And they, my wife is from Louisville, and Primer was technically a Louisville band. Like they were, sorry to bring it back around to Primer, but what Primer did was Primer was signed out of Memphis.
Okay.
And Bobby was from the Louisville area. So basically when he got signed, he moved the band to Louisville. So they kind of came in town as a signed band. They were never had a local following. They were never the local heroes.
Right.
Flaw, on the other hand, local heroes. Like they, over the years, even if it was just Chris Voles and a couple of dudes playing as Flaw, they would still sell 300-400 tickets. It's always been like that.
It's crazy.
And they, even when I first moved up here, I'm like, yeah, I played in Primer. Like, oh yeah, but do you know Flaw? It's always been one of those things. I actually ended up playing a little bit with Jay Daunt in another band after Primer and Flaw both broke up a while back, and then I actually ended up playing in another band I tried out for a band with Ryan, their bass player, when he was playing guitar in another band with a couple of dudes from 40 Below Summer, but yeah, Flaw around here, they cannot do anything wrong.
Yeah, that's kind of like the Urge in St. Louis.
Everybody loves the shit out of the Urge in St. Louis. Yeah.
Actually, I played a couple of shows with the Urge. That's funny. That's funny you said that.
It's funny because they always would play with all these heavy bands. Yeah. And then, I remember reading
with brass on.
Or I was listening to The Point recently. Not recently, like maybe. When I say recently, I mean within the last 3 years. And I listened to this interview with the Urge where they're like, yeah, so we went on tour with like Deftones or something, and everybody would listen to, or they went on tour with Slipknot at one point too, and he's like, yeah, all these metalheads are standing there watching us play with our horns and our shit, and they were like, yeah, they would come out, they'd come out at the end of the show and be like, you guys are actually a really good band. Really weird.
I remember I saw a festival poster, or maybe like a radio show poster or something for St. Louis. Same thing within the last couple of years, and the Urge was really high up on it, like above established bands, and I was like, yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, that's St. Louis, man. Like we watch blues games, we eat Emo's pizza, and we watch
and we wait for the Urge to come back.
Yeah,
it's not far from that, because there's been multiple times that they've played Point Fest, which is kind of like the big local venue for like a summer music show, and they're always on the headlining stage, and they're normally one of the 3 last bands, even if they'll be playing like you said, they'll be playing against bands that should be much higher billed, and it's always been that way, and it probably will continue to be that way.
Well, a few years ago, I think Bush headlined Point Fest, and the Urge went on and played right before Bush,
2/3 of the crowd left.
Everybody left. Yeah, after the Urge was done playing. It was like, holy shit! Could you not feel like you're more in St. Louis? And,
we got to see Cake. We got to see Chevelle.
Everybody loved Cake.
And then the Urge came on, and I'm thinking, really, Bush is going to go on after the Urge? The Urge played. It had been the first time in almost a decade since they'd played, and it was them coming back to be a band again, full time.
Wow.
Blew everybody away. And then 2/3 of the building leaves.
That's awesome.
And I'm like, I feel really sorry for Bush for making that choice, or for their publicist that made that choice for them.
Yeah, our other host, Josh, he's like one of the biggest, most sold out Bush fans ever. He was telling me about that. He was like, it's just bullshit, man. And I was like, dude, that's St. Louis, man. We tried to play hardcore in St. Louis, and we would play with bands that were 10 years past their expiration date, and everybody was going fucking crazy over them. It's just it's a really hard town to break out of, and it's just St. Louis is it's very unique in that you can come to St. Louis and it be kind of like a time capsule.
Yeah, or you can watch They Might Be Giants here, and you'll see one of the biggest mosh pits you've ever seen in your life.
Right,
to They Might Be Giants show, and I'm not kidding. I saw probably 10,000 people going crazy for They Might Be Giants, and I'm like, that's bizarre.
That's crazy. So, what is the love in St. Louis for Story of the Year?
Oh, that's another one.
Yeah,
that's right there with the Urge.
I remember them as Big Blue Monkey. That was Story of the Year.
Yeah.
And they were just another local band. As far as I was concerned, every time I would go see a show in St. Louis, Big Blue Monkey was there.
Yeah.
And they made huge waves in St. Louis, because I think what it really boils down to cement their popularity in St. Louis, because they weren't playing new metal. Actually, Big Blue Monkey was. I don't know if anybody.
Big Blue Monkey was.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody in Story of the Year now would admit to that, but that's what they were. But when they became Story of the Year and they kind of jumped on that pop punk emo thing that they did. I think what really went far with St. Louis people was the fact that they filmed their video for their biggest single at the Creepy Crawl. I think that was really big for them, because we'd all been to the crawl. We'd all, if you've ever been in a band in St. Louis, you've played at the Creepy Crawl 5-6 times. They're not even that. It doesn't even exist anymore. It's gone. But
I think they're one of those bands too that they kind of wore St. Louis on their sleeves too. It's not like they ever were like, they did move to California for a minute, to get signed.
Oh yeah.
But even at that point, they were still, we're from St. Louis. No matter,
they don't call it Page Avenue. So that's a big street here in St. Louis.
People from St. Louis are very proud
that you're here, that you're from here,
that we're from here. I mean, even we say it. I'm not proud of the music scene necessarily, but we have no problem throwing out the STL name. When we do our podcast, we're just like, yeah, we're from St. Louis. Like when we went and saw American Standards this week, we were just like, yeah, we drove from St. Louis to see you guys, and everybody's like, am I supposed to be impressed by that?
Hell yeah, you are.
The straight shot.
Hell yeah, home of the Blues. It didn't go so well this year, but fuck yeah, we're the team that goes to. We're the team that goes to the playoffs every year and
loses in the
chokes.
first round.
Yeah,
oh man,
have an amazing season up to that point, and then you get to the playoffs, and it's like, how do you? Oh, never mind.
I'll give you my last, because like I said, we traded out shows a lot with Big Blue Monkey, and even Adam was in that band Low Cash. So we traded out shows with those guys too, and we would play with them in St. Louis, they would play with us in Nashville and things like that. And so it's funny, I think Finch in their first big album thanked Big Blue Monkey, and we were at our band rehearsal and we're like, fuck it, man, they made it, it's over, that was making it at that point. They got thanked in a Finch album, as Big Blue Monkey, and then they obviously Until the Day I Die or whatever came out, and the rest is history. But it was still so funny, the level of making it, that we thought that they'd they're on their way, they did it.
Sure.
Just for getting a thank you and a record.
Yeah, and the spinoff, I guess, is still doing pretty good here too in St. Louis. Greek Fire.
Yeah.
Saw those guys not too long ago, or probably not too long ago, as in the last 5 years. But yeah,
right. It's good to know somebody else has my timeline.
Right. That's the thing. It's that just happened a couple of years ago, right? And it would have been 12 years ago or something.
Right. Yeah.
So Dan, what's your favorite new metal band?
Oh shit. man. Okay, so back to the STL thing.
Okay.
We had a...
Hang on, let me get it pulled up.
We had kind of what I would call STL's best kept secret as far as nu metal goes. It's not Shattermask. It's a band called The Fifth Element.
Okay.
And they were, I guess if you had to compare them to anything, I guess they were kind of like a more melodic version of Slipknot. They didn't rap or anything. I had a CD release like sampler that had 2 Fifth Element songs on it. One was called like Pill Whore, and the other one was called Recreational War Games. And they screamed in such a way like that I would consider to be kind of the St. Louis sound as far as like screaming vocalists go. And Joe, once the podcast launches, if you listen to it, I don't know if you can hear the music he's playing now or not, but he's playing The Fifth Element through our headphones. And basically, they only put one album out as far as I know, and I'd seen them a couple times in St. Louis, and they were a band that I thought was going to be huge, but they're probably my favorite nu metal band in the sense that I got to see them. They were local to us, and the screaming was so intense that if you listen to the screaming on the Fifth Element album, which I don't think it's on Spotify, so good luck finding that. I think a guy has all the stuff uploaded on YouTube. But when I started becoming a screaming vocalist, I borrowed heavily from what this guy had done, and because that's the whole thing, right? If you're going to be in a successful band, it's not that everybody loves how original you are, but it's not that you're original. You just borrowed something from a band that no one had heard before, and that was me 100%. I loved the Fifth Element. I still listen to their album to this day, and they unfortunately just never went anywhere. But they were my favorite of that style. They had turntables and everything. They didn't really rap, but they had that whole sound, like the funky bass and the clean vocals and the screaming and the mix and all that. And it's just a good cocktail for me. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, that's good stuff, man. I wonder if that was the same turntablist from that band Low Cash that was in with Adam.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting.
I don't know how many turntablists you guys had in St. Louis running around.
Probably for a while there. I think it was like everybody had a turntable at their house somewhere.
Yeah, there's actually a pretty big hip hop community here. So
yep,
that's true.
So there's a lot of turntablists in the area.
I think I played a band on the podcast a while back called the Discrepancies. I believe they're from St. Louis.
Okay, yeah, they
actually they're actually pretty good. Not too bad. Seemed kind of very new metal-ish.
Yeah, oh yeah. But, even if it came out in 2016, it's going to sound like new metal if it's from St. Louis.
Yeah, because there's another one that's pretty popular in the St. Louis area, Derailed.
Yeah.
And they're got some new metal influences in their music. Actually, I knew the bassist before he kind of dropped out and started doing his own thing.
Right. Joe,
what's your favorite?
What do you got, buddy?
I get to cheat and say the Third Strike is my favorite nu metal band.
Third Strike, that's a reference. Yeah.
Because
one album, one and done, baby.
One and done. They throw everything in. It's rock, it's hip hop, it's a little bit of metal, it's got the scream, it's got the yell, it's got the groove. It's
got the cover of Paranoid by Black Sabbath on it.
Well, yeah, most people have never heard that, and they should if they haven't heard it. I mean, I could cheat and say Stained because, Stained is Stained, but I like Third Strike. That's my number one.
All right. Josh, cool. You're our guy. You're our golden calf. So what do you got, man?
Man, if my favorite nu metal band of all time is, it's very easy to say, but it's got to be Limp Bizkit. You can't go wrong with Limp Bizkit.
Okay.
I mean, that's always been my guilty pleasure, no matter what period of, no matter how heavy I was into Lamb of God, I was still like, man, Nookie is actually a pretty good song.
That's cool.
But yeah, man, like I said, I got to play with them in like 97. I got to go see them a ton. I've probably seen them, 10, 12 times over the years. Every time I've seen them, amazing live band. Yes, I understand that they were goofy and cliche and it was a silly gimmick and all that stuff.
It's a time period,
Yeah, it's
I was gonna say it worked.
Yeah, no, it worked. It worked
Clearly
very well.
Worked. Yeah, no kidding.
I mean, they're still they played here at a festival a couple of years ago with, like Five Finger Death Punch and Korn and all those bands, and they still were like high up on the bill, and they were probably, people are still talking about how they stole the show, and so they still can bring it live, and great band, good mix too, with Sam and Wes and John Otto and DJ Lethal, who's not in there anymore, but that's still, that mix of guys put out a pretty cool product, and it wasn't. It wasn't anything that really happened before it, and not necessarily something that's happened since. Just with Sam's bass lines and Wes's guitar noodling, and John's kind of a jazzier drummer than most, and Fred's Fred, so you can't really go wrong with that.
Talk about cliches. I mean, they really kind of invented the cliche.
Right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was weird with Limp Bizkit too, because like everybody's going to talk shit about Limp Bizkit now, and myself included. I'm one of the main offenders. However, I remember not getting dates with girls in high school because they like guys that dressed like Fred Durst, and not guys like dressed like me. Like they're like, dude, you like 80s metal, you think that's cool? You need to start listening to good shit like Limp Bizkit, and And I remember being like, well, fuck that band. So maybe there's like a personal thing there,
right?
But I get it though. Like my favorite band of all time is Zao, and I talked to their lead singer at Cornerstone one year, and I remember there's just something about when you've met the band, that makes it so much more real, I guess, and adds a legitimacy to it. I mean, it's most people that talk shit about Limp Bizkit have never met Fred Durst. And I kind of get the impression from these the kind of guy that I could probably sit down and talk to for a long time. It's not weird, and and I think that's the problem with metal in general, is that people talk a lot of shit, but they're talking about people that they're never going to interact with.
Well, that's the thing with doing my style of podcast. I guess yours too, but where you have guests on from bands and you walk away, you're like, do I really like this band or do I really like that person? And they just win me over. Because even, back we were talking about ICP, but I had the dudes from Twisted on. Yeah. And not something I would ever really listen to, but to get into it and to interview the guy, I listened to the album a few times, and that was when I had the co-host Mike. Yeah. And he has no business listening to a Twisted album.
Sure.
And we both kind of like, man, it's actually really good, right? And we're like, I think so. I think it's really good.
They're really nice guys, yeah.
Yeah, then we talked to him, and it was a fun interview, and it was, it got picked up by a bunch of those Fago lovers kind of sites, and
sure,
it's one of my biggest episodes out there, so I'm like, well, maybe it is a good album, and it's so funny. I know what you're talking about when you meet the guy. Do I really like this band or do I just like the guy? And I think that's it's a fine line, especially doing what we do with the podcast.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's been unreal for us. We had a podcast last week that we did with somebody that I was really a big fan of. He wasn't even a music guy, at least as far as I knew. We found out differently when we did the podcast with him, but it was the angry video game nerd James Rolfe, and we were super. He's like the guy that started the whole YouTube thing where people would review video games and stuff, and I was watching one of his videos and I saw he liked Black Sabbath. I was like, well, we'll talk about Black Sabbath for an hour.
Oh yeah, I listened to that episode.
Yeah, and we were so blown away by how much more professional he was than we were, and we were. I really tried to push the fanboy down as much as I could, because I always worried that I've never been the kind of guy that's like, oh my God, do you know who you are? But it's when he Skyped into us, we were like, I literally was almost in this mode where I was like, hey, you remember when you did that video game nerd video? Yeah, it was so awesome, It's so great that you did that, And we it's so funny too, because if you listen to that episode, that guy kept us on topic.
Oh yeah, he did.
It is literally the most on topic episode we've ever done, because we're kind of we're not famous at all, but the people that like us, that's what the thing that they like about us the most is we never really end up talking about what we wanted to talk about. But Joe does such a good job of mixing it to where it sounds like that, that it works out. But
we will reveal my secrets.
Yeah, I mean, even when we were talking to Travis, it was weird because like we knew Travis from before. But when we were just a band, starry-eyed band wanting to record an album with him, like...
You guys were, like, huge Crutch fans, and I was like, I texted him, I'm like, man, these dudes love you. Like,
I did, dude. I did. Well, it's funny, too. So, funny story. I didn't bring it up on his episode because hopefully he doesn't remember. But we when we were at his house, we were doing we were recording, and I was like, I've never seen a real live version of your guys' album Hope Prevails before. I've never seen the physical copy of it. And he's like, well, what do you mean? He's like, you just listen to the MySpace stuff? And I was like, no, a guy that I knew sent me the tracks via email. And I burned them to a CD. And he was like, you ripped off my band? And we were like, shit.
No,
yeah,
not me.
totally not. Yeah, like we didn't.
I bought it later.
I did buy it later, but yeah, it was one of those like,
way
oh God.
later.
Yeah, I was like, oh God, we just pissed this guy off and we're at his house now. And it's really weird. And then I was like, oh shit, I hope he doesn't remember that. Like whenever, because I had heard As the Story Grows first, and then I heard him pimping your podcast, and I was like, yeah, dude, I want to hear all this shit, and so I think before we recorded any of our voices to audio, I had probably listened to everything As the Story Grows. I think I'd gotten halfway through your episodes because you got like what 800 episodes? No, it's like 103 now.
103, but I mean, there's also like bonus episodes and stuff in there too. So.
Yeah, so you guys should all go on and get on his Patreon and get all the extra shit. Patreon's a big deal, man. Guys like Travis and Josh here, they need that shit. Like it helps pay for so much stuff.
Throw us in there too.
Yeah, okay, yeah, we have a Patreon too, but yeah, like it's one of those things that you listen to these podcasts and you enjoy literally at this point hundreds of hours of audio. It's cool, it's cool to get that kind of support, and even sending an email saying dude, I like what you guys do. That's how honestly that's how we typically get people to agree to be on our podcast. Is we're like, look, we're not bullshitting here. We're huge fans, like yeah. And no,
it was cool it's actually funny. That was the first email I've gotten through the new website, and I was like, okay. Oh, that's cool. Like,
I was like, man, where's the email address? How do I contact this guy? And then I was like, yeah, fuck it, I'll just do the website thing.
No, it came to me and I thought that was cool. I got it, and I was like, wow, it's a huge honor for someone to ask me to come on and do some stuff.
Yeah,
it's always fun. It's fun to reach out and and meet everybody and things like that. So
yeah, so I listened to the Deftones cover.
Yeah,
and
what do you think about that?
I like it.
Let's talk about that, Dan. Yeah, go right ahead.
Let's talk about Pantera.
Pantera.
So anybody that doesn't know at this point, I would assume anybody that's listening to this pretty much is a fan of your show anyway. Pantera is a collaboration between Josh here, Brandon Kellum of American Standards, Travis Turner, and
Eric
Hall. And so yeah, Brandon actually announced that they did that on our show, which was crazy. And then we listened to it. It was Elite by Deftones, and I remember I was like, holy shit, yeah, like because I remember I was thinking like, what Deftones song are they gonna do that's gonna work with Brandon's style of singing, and it turned out cool, and I can't wait to hear more from it. Brandon has been bugging me, not bugging me. I've been totally into it. He's like, dude, we should do like a dual vocal thing, get another podcast on. And I was like, I don't know, man. Do you want like a 17-member podcast band? Yes. That's gonna get pretty muddled after a while. I think you've got the vocal side of it under control. He's like, no, it'll be cool. You do it. We'll do like trade-offs and stuff. And I was like, we'll see.
It's funny with Brandon and American Standards. It's because somehow he got on Trav's podcast, then they got on to Shoot the Shred podcast, and then and then basically got onto my podcast, and then we all sat back and like, how did that happen? Because, you know, not that they weren't a known band or whatever. And, you know, a lot of times the people reach out to me like, hey, you know, we got this new album coming out. We would like to be on the show. We're big fans of your show.
Right.
I'm a sucker for people saying that they're fans of my show and want to come on. Like, I'm like, okay.
I might have been coached on that, you know, beforehand.
What's that?
I said I might have been coached on that beforehand.
Yeah, it's like it's just funny, you know, like, you know, not many bands reach out to me, which I think is kind of funny.
Yeah.
But because if I was in a band, I would be, you know, basically doing what American Standards did. So I was like, wow, this band's actually really trying hard. And so I had them on. And then basically I talked to Trav, and he's like, yeah, they just reached out to me, and I kind of felt compelled to do it. So we knew nothing of this band before they all came on they were on all of our respective podcasts. And I always thought it was kind of funny that they somehow weaseled their way onto all of our shows.
Right, then, yeah. We were sitting in a movie theater watching a movie, or starting to watch a movie, and Joe he's like, dude, we just got this tweet from this band called American Standards. He wants to be on our show. And we were like, okay, because we were like, and that was whenever we developed this idea of, okay, from here on out, if we have somebody on the podcast that's from a band, we're going to talk about another band that they nice. Like, and we're going to go from there, because there's so many podcasts that exist now where it's like, how did your band start? Do you have any cool stories? What was it like working with X producer? What was it like? Blah 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 blah. Dude, it's 2017. We live in a world where you can pull all that shit up on Wikipedia. Yeah. You can pull all that shit up on a Google search. You know, pulling a podcast. So it's like, we want to hear what Brandon Kellum of American Standards thinks of this. We want to hear what Travis Turner thinks of Death. We want to hear what Josh Toomey thinks of Pantera. I mean, nu metal. We will eventually. I will swallow my pride, and I will send that email that's like,
bring it on.
Yeah, or I'll probably text you, since I can just do that now. But it's like, hey man, it's time. We're gonna do the fucking Pantera episode, and maybe that'll be the one I'm absent for, and like, you guys just talk. That'd be really cool. I'd love to listen to that. Listen to my own podcast without me on it. That'd be awesome.
We tried that once, and it didn't work.
I'm going on my honeymoon in a couple of weeks, and I've been trying to bank a couple episodes and stuff like that. And I was thinking, in some friends of mine, the Cobras and Fire podcast. You know, they're pretty cool. They'll just, you know, discussion podcast. They play songs. But they do a thing called Podcast Takeover, where this other guy comes on and plays like 10 of his favorite songs. They've probably done 3 or 4 episodes like that. And I was like, I reached out to him. I'm like, I got this idea. I was like, you guys want to host a Talk Toomey while I'm on my honeymoon? And they're like, so I think I'm gonna have them do a host a Talk Toomey. Send them all my bumpers and show stuff.
And she's okay with that?
What's that?
And she's gonna be okay with that?
Who? My wife?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'll be on my honeymoon. They're going to do the show.
Okay, I gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, let them do an episode while I'm gone. So
that'd be cool.
We'll see. It'd be fun. I would like to hear. I think they'd have fun with it.
Yeah, for sure. We'll definitely be pimping the hell out of it. We'll definitely throw links to your stuff on there. If there's anybody that listens to our show that hasn't heard your show already, we definitely want to get.
Yeah, I mean, that's that was how I was when I played music. It was all about, trading shows and shit like that. So I carry that over. I understand the game, and it's kind of funny. We're talking about downloads, and we'll get off this after. I could talk forever about the actual inner workings of podcasting.
Sure.
Which, actually, listening to you guys, I mean, you guys were forefathers of podcasting back in the day. So that's crazy.
Okay, yeah, all right. Whatever. Please don't go listen to those podcasts.
Do it.
No,
I might do it.
No, I mean either way. I mean, you guys were light years ahead of me even thinking of a podcast. I mean, I was never an iPod person. So, well, I'm gonna jump off here, gentlemen.
Yeah, cool, right, man. We really appreciate you, and we'll definitely stay in touch. It was a ton of fun.
Yeah, just tag me in all the stuff, and I'll post it and all that crap, or you can text it to me or whatever we need to do, man.
Yeah, that's cool. Awesome.
And no joke, man. If you ever need help with anything like editing or stuff like that, just let me know.
I will. Can't pay you, but I'll definitely let you know.
Yeah,
can't charge him.
He's an editing.
Don't know
genius.
where you live.
Yeah. So, all right, man. Well, you have yourself a good night, and we hope you enjoy your honeymoon coming up.
Absolutely. Talk to you guys soon.
All right. See you.
Take care.
Thanks.
Hey, Dan. You just had a conversation with Josh Toomey. What do you think about that?
I think it was awesome.
This has been episode 15 of Discography Discussion. Thank you for listening. You can like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Subscribe to our podcast everywhere you listen to podcasts, including Google Play, iTunes, and Stitcher. Visit DiscussMetal.com for all things discography discussion, and please send questions and comments to danandjoeshow@gmail.com.
Well, what does James Rolfe think about Black Sabbath?
And not only was he like a Black Sabbath fan, he was like a Black Sabbath fan. Like I had no idea. He had like alternate. I liked his alternate sequencing of the album 13, and I'm like,
yeah,
this dude's. Yeah, he was definitely a fan.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey Josh, remember that time you were in Primer 55?
Yeah. That was awesome.
That was awesome.